All right, so today we have Deepti Srivastava, founder and CEO of Snow Leopard, which you can find at snowleopard.ai. You can go to the website, read how they describe themselves, but I'll snag a couple of lines from Deepti's talk at the AI conference this past fall, and whose video you can find on her website or online somewhere. But the two lines I wanted to snag from her talk are the following. Bridging the gap between AI and business data and access to the right data from the right source at the right time. So with that long-winded introduction, Deepti, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's really exciting to be here.
So let's start from the beginning. So what problem is Snow Leopard trying to solve?
Yeah, so I will try not to be long-winded, but the real issue that, as I see it, is that we're really excited about this new platform shift with AI, right? Like we're really excited that it's going to increase productivity, open up new use cases, really build new types of businesses and new types of products and new types of ways of interacting with systems around the world, right? But in my experience, you can't actually realize all of that new value creation and productivity and things like that until and unless you connect it to the crown jewels of a business. And the crown jewels of a business are operational business data, right? The data that you're using for your critical business operations, those things have to be connected to your AI systems in order for any business, an enterprise business or whatever, to realize its full potential, to really realize the full potential of AI. That is not happening today. And that's what Snow Leopard is here to solve.
So it passes the smell test, right? So obviously you have data from your operational systems, which can range from, web, your website, Salesforce, Marketo, everything, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of questions. One, I guess the reason you want access to them directly is that you want, as your tagline in the conference said, the right data from the right source at the right time, and waiting for that data to land in some data warehouse or lakehouse is too late, right? But on the other hand, it's one thing to have a hunch, and that when you talk to people about it, oh, this sounds reasonable. But the traditional way that people start a company is they actually talk to people. So is this an imaginary problem, Deepti, or is this a real problem? So how did you gain the confidence that this was an actual problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Here's the thing. I've spent nearly 2 decades building enterprise data solutions. So I started my career, like I went to grad school, right, for distributed fault tolerant systems way back in the day. I was a distributed systems engineer in the Oracle RAC database kernel, right? So I saw the world of data, enterprise data specifically, from the bottom up, right? Like, because the data systems, keeping systems of record, right? Databases that keep systems record are at the bottom of most stacks, and that's where all of the critical information that runs a business runs, right? So first as a builder of those systems, and then I went to Google and became the founding PM for Spanner, which is a globally distributed transactional data system, like a database, and then launched it externally on Google Cloud too. So across those experiences, like basically I was responsible for onboarding Gmail and Google Play Store and Google Ads and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these are very different systems, but like applications from a user perspective, but their data is all stored in these essentially structured data sources like databases, right? And one of the key things that I realized over that is that, the business data, the operational business data is where the true value of any kind of application lies for one thing. The second thing is, going back to your data lake conversation, like data silos are a fact of life in enterprises, right? Like it's great to imagine that there's one big data source that you can go to query anything at all times, right? And you dump everything in there, and then there's one way to interface with them, with that data, with all your enterprise data. And it just isn't a fact of life, right? Like we tried to do this actually, because Spanner is a petabyte scale database. We tried to do that. We did that with Spanner and BigQuery too, but the fact is, like, each business unit will have its own data sources, right? Like each platform will have its own data sources. Like you have one PostgreSQL in this BU, if you have another PostgreSQL, then you have Snowflake, you have whatever, right? Like you have CRM systems like Salesforce and things like that. And so to think about having to extract all that data and put it somewhere and then use it just isn't, it's impractical, first of all. And second of all, even if you're doing it, like maintaining those data pipelines and like maintaining the sort of scaffolding required to keep having these loops of ETL, like always constantly running, is just, frankly, it's really hard. It's a waste of time and engineering resources, and it doesn't even give you the freshest data, right? Like, because nobody's ETLing every second, right? The other part here is that let's say you're doing all this stuff, right? Like you lose accuracy, because not only is accuracy as a dimension of freshness, like you need the correct data at the correct time, right? Accuracy is also a function of like how you extract the data and how you're transforming it, right? And so if you're doing ETL and trying to mesh a bunch of different types of JSON objects, database, SQL data, et cetera, all in one place, you're normalizing it into some form, and like that's losing accuracy, like from the actual data source in which it was put, like Marketo or whatever, right? And so that's also like not giving you the right information that you need in order to make the right decisions. This becomes even more exacerbated when you're trying to talk to AI systems that are, by definition, sort of not deterministic and not precision machines, right? So to go back to what you were saying, like, yes, I started the company originally when this whole like platform shift happened, when OpenAI sort of released ChatGPT back in the day. I was like, oh, this is cool technology. But then I was like, this has always been a driving force for me. Like, how are people using it? What is the impact of this technology? And so I went to talk to my friends or people that I knew who, were platform or systems leaders, right? So I went and talked to people building, at the time, chatbots. Now they're called sort of AI assistants in the CRM system, like a support chatbot, or like now they're like people who are building agents or agentic frameworks, right? So I talked to people in fintech, in e-commerce, in finance, directly in sort of these CRM, CSM sort of platforms, and they all were saying that it's really hard to really get value out of these, like beyond POCs, because we can't connect our real data into it, right? If the de facto now is RAG, which makes sense. Retrieval augmented generation makes sense. But when you're doing RAG and stuffing in everything into a vector database, like, again, it's fuzzy matching, you're losing accuracy, you're losing freshness, all that stuff. So most of these companies that I spoke to VP of platforms, I spoke to DevOps leads, I spoke to CEOs, and most of them were like, we don't know how to run systems in production, for these kinds of systems in production, because there is no precedence for it, which means it's really important to create tools that are simple, APIs that are simple to use, right? And the second thing is that without connecting our business data to these things, like, it's great to chat with your PDF, but I'm not getting the real like critical path value out of it. And so that's what led to create, like, me doing Snow Leopard.
So the people who are kind of so I guess there's a few things in what you said there. So one is that I guess most of the hipster developers in the Bay Area are focused on text, because after all, the underlying models are text interfaces, right? So they started out with text,
That's right.
but then as you point out, a lot of the interesting data is actually not in text; it's in operational systems. And then secondly, even the text, if you want it timely, it gets outdated because it's you've got the text, then you've got to create an embedding, and then you've got
Yeah,
to store an embedding. So there's a whole ETL pipeline right there because there might be some kind of data pre-processing before you even
that's
embed,
right.
right? Um, and so actually in that regard, people are beginning to question the whole thing in terms of maybe we should not have a separate storage system for the embeddings at all, right? But that's a secondary thing. So actually, I just gave a keynote at the Nodes conference of Neo4j, and I highlighted what you're doing. And
Oh, thank you.
one of the things I said was it actually surprised me that after I talked to you, I'm going, this is kind of obvious, but there's not a lot of people working on this, right?
That's right.
So the people who have encountered how obvious this problem is, the need for operational data, what are they doing? In the
Yeah.
absence of Snow Leopard, what's the current solution?
Yes. I think two things. One, you're right. Like most people are not having this problem because most of the world right now is like focused on uh, RAG as it relates to unstructured data, text, image, video, those kinds of things, right? And by the way, I don't want like I'm not dissing anyone.
Those are cool, but when you get
Yeah,
to agents really helping you
yes,
do actual things, they may
yeah.
not help, right? So
That's exactly, yeah. And I think that they're missing, that's what I'm saying. Like we keep ignoring all this data when we're doing all this cool stuff, like with unstructured data. We're missing all of the business data that has existed for a long time. So number one, over the last month, even since I gave the talk, I'm hearing a lot more people actually facing this problem, which means that I think people are starting to sort of understand what you're saying, right? Um, but there's still like the tip of the spear folks that are encountering this problem today because they have to are people who are building AI assistants and people who are building agents or agentic frameworks. Because
so
those both
what is the brute force solution?
they're still trying to figure it out. I will
I
say
see.
that honestly. But the brute force solution is either dump it into a lake and try to query that, and then it doesn't work most of the time because it's stale or old or you can't actually put all of the data in there, right? So they aren't really actually getting the right answer at this point, or they're looking for smaller scope solutions in the agent framework cases, in the agent cases where they're like, oh, we'll do it because we can write a function here, or we can just write a connector here. We'll do it for this one particular use case or this other particular use case, but there's no way to actually scale it to make it repeatable and to make it sort of robust from a systems engineering standpoint. So it's a lot of like hacking together different solutions. But I will be honest with you, like the thing that people tell me a lot is, oh, we'll just write a function for it, like an OpenAI function or a Snowpark function, something. But they're still in the process of building that. Like nobody's actually put it in production. And for the people that are trying to put it in production, they have very hacky single point solutions and they know they're not able to scale.
And then the function they're writing is meant to uh, extract the data from the operational system
Correct.
specifically.
Yeah. So like there's Berkeley has this Gorilla LLM that's supposed to
Yeah.
do that, right? But again, most of this like making the reasoning better. So actually, let's step back, right? Like there's a lot of discussion around this problem. One approach is let's make the reasoning better. So let's dump even more data into the LLM, or let's build agent frameworks that will, when you connect the data sources to them, by the way, I don't know how you're going to connect them, that's your problem. But once you connect it to them, like they will extract the data somehow, right? And then give you answers.
But then you have, the massive token
Correct.
token cost and then latency. And then how do you even know it's correct at the end?
That's
Right. So,
that. So all those things. And by the way,
yeah.
you are still writing functions or function equivalents to connect. So anytime that you have a new data source that you need to add, now you have to write a whole new function and function pipeline, right? So again, scalability wise, manageability wise, and repeatability wise, it's a nightmare.
So in 2 to 3 sentences, describe Snow Leopard today. What what is Snow Leopard and what can it do?
Yeah, so Snow Leopard is an intelligent data retrieval system that sits in front of all your data sources and can retrieve data on demand in production based on the question asked. So based on a query that comes in, we take a query that comes in, we look at the query and figure out where the query needs to go to get the answer. So we do intelligent routing on demand, right? Then we figure out which data needs to be fetched. So like which row, column, or whatever, right? And then we go and fetch the data from that data source and give it back to you. So if I can just show a diagram, because I think a lot of people expect that we're doing ETL, but we're not actually doing ETL.
For our listeners, Deepti is the anti-pipeline person.
I am, yes, this is true. Having done this so many times, I just feel like the pain around pipelines so much that you shouldn't.
And listeners on the podcast, you may want to switch over to the YouTube version at this point.
Yeah, so like just to motivate this, like we are talking about a data retrieval platform that can retrieve data from any source. We are focused or starting with structured, semi-structured, and API sources because they seem to be the most neglected and the most needed. And so the idea here is that you can put Snow Leopard in between your AI system, agent, assistant, any of those, right? And we will sit in front of all your data sources and extract the data to get the right data from the right data source at the right time. So this is what what I'm showing on screen is basically what the canonical AI app looks like today, which is basically stuff all your data into a vector store and then at query time, do a lookup in the vector store for similarity searches, and then use that as context for your LLM, right? That's the RAG system that exists today. With Snow Leopard, what we're saying is we'll sit in front of all your data sources, right? Which could be databases, data warehouses, and APIs. And when a question comes in, we look at the question, right? So you haven't moved any data anywhere. There is no data movement happening in this case. Now, if you have a pipeline used for, aggregating a bunch of data into a warehouse, cool. That can just be another data source here. But essentially what we're doing is we're looking at the question, we're deciding which one or many data sources to go to answer that question. And then we are fetching natively. This is important. Like we're not trying to denormalize or any of that stuff. We're fetching natively from those data sources, one or many. So for example, if your database is a PostgreSQL database, we'll talk to it through PostgreSQL, right? If it's a Snowflake data warehouse, we'll talk to it using Snowflake's interface.
Or Databricks. Yeah.
Or Databricks, or in fact, like you said, Salesforce or Marketo or whatever. We'll just use the native APIs, which means you get accuracy in terms of
just to set some delineation here, you're responsible for fetching the data. So the user writes some kind of prompt, you fetch the data, you send it back to the user, and then it's up to them what to do with it. So you're not going to write all the prompt logic to parse the data and process it, right?
So this is the thing. Like we're actually looking for people to give us feedback on this, but we have two APIs. One API just takes in the question, the text string, right? And returns data back.
Here's the data. It could be like CSV, it could be JSON, it could be whatever.
Yeah, we're doing JSON, but whatever. Converting from CSV to JSON doesn't matter, right? Like there's an API response, which is like, here's the data in JSON format. The other way to use Snow Leopard, if you don't want to do any of that, is basically we are a BYO-LLM system. So I'm agnostic to your LLM. You may have fine-tuned one for your particular verbiage or for performance or whatever. And so we can, in the second case, we can actually take the question in, retrieve the data, and we can generate the prompt to prompt your LLM and get the actual response out.
So so does that exist, the second one?
Yes, both of them exist.
Okay. And so, but generally when you retrieve the data, you said you format it in JSON.
Yes, that seems to be the most easy way for people to accept it, so we format it that way.
So then, if it's in JSON, presumably the developer can take care of.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think there's two things here, right? Like if you look at a bunch of enterprises, and by the way, we're basically an enterprise data company, right? So most enterprises have a development team or developers that want more control, right? So that they may have some data that they don't want to, show to anybody else, right? Or is coming from another system or whatever. So they may want to stuff more data into the prompt before sending it to the LLM, right? So our job is to retrieve the data and give it back to the developer so that they can do whatever data manipulation or prompt generation they want to do. But if they don't want to do that, then we can also just give the response back.
By the way, Deepti, if the diagram is real and it exists as drawn, right? So
Yes,
it
yes.
does make sense that there's no pipeline.
Yeah,
So why do you think people go into the whole pipeline direction? If the way you drew it, of course, I'll just go directly from source, right?
because of, so I think there's like, again, the 20 years I've spent on this,
Yeah.
like I think it's very difficult to have a system where you can answer all your questions, right? Like they don't have to be natural language questions. I mean, if you want to like even do business analysis, whatever, that it's just really hard to constantly build these kind of connections to all your data sources. You don't even know what data sources exist, right? So it's much easier to say, I have data in Stripe, I have data in Salesforce, I have data in Marketo, I have data in Notion, right? And I have data in Postgres,
Correct.
right? And I have events log data.
Right.
So let's just dump it all in one place, and then now somebody who knows SQL can query it, right?
But
So this is
that seems like a much more of a data warehouse BI application. This is more like a real-time agentic. This
I
this
agree with you.
getting directly from the source fits more into this agentic future, right?
I agree with you. I think what I'm trying to explain is like why people went this dumping route because it was hard to do what we're doing right now, right? Which is this agentic thing, right? Frankly, it's just always easier to have your warehouse, lakehouse be the quote unquote source of query or source of information, even if it's old in a lot of cases. But that sounds better than it actually is. It actually is, for all the reasons we talked about. It's stale, it's cumbersome, it's inaccurate, it's like not as performant. There's a bunch of issues with that situation. But yes, what we're building is, as I said, and you said earlier, I am anti-pipeline. So go fetch it from the systems that best handle it and that have the system of record.
No, because I mean, if you think about, looking ahead, right? So
Mhm.
agents will, unless the agent's job is like that of an analyst, where, the expectation for an analyst will look at a data warehouse or
Yeah,
something. But if an agent is fulfilling a task, usually they want to fulfill the task with the the actual data, not the data in the data warehouse, the data in the operational system, right? So
but
moving
that's
forward, it seems like it's more natural to actually directly hit the operational system for all these agentic applications, unless their task is backward looking, kind of summarize what happened yesterday, right?
100%. I think the other thing that why these lake houses, et cetera, grew is that you don't want to hit your production database with these kind of long running queries, right? You don't want to hit the performance. But in the agent world, right, you actually need to do point queries most of the time, right? You're not actually doing full table scans.
Right.
And so this is why I'm saying like when you need to do a full table scan, you can aggregate data in a warehouse and we can just connect to the warehouse and fetch information from there, right? So there is some transformation you might want to do, right? Combine Stripe with Marketo with email. Cool. And then we'll go fetch it from there. But in total, you shouldn't be doing data movement all the time. It's like expensive, annoying, brittle, all that, and frankly, a waste of your engineering time. So in that case, to your point, if we're moving to a future of agents and agents that talk to other agents and do a bunch of work, right? Like if you're talking about a system of sensors and actuators, if you will, in that case, you do want live data from the source to be able to make decisions quickly and accurately. And that's literally why, that's where we're seeing a bunch of early traction too. There's two places where we're seeing early traction. One of them is people building agents and agentic frameworks.
So if I'm an engineer or developer listening to this and I get convinced, okay, it seems like this all makes sense. So talk me out of building this on my own. So why should I not attempt to build this on my own? Because
Yeah.
you folks probably, I mean, obviously you have the background to build it, but
Yes.
uh,
I'm
why not?
yes.
Why not? I mean, why can't I just build and hit directly the operational system? So talk me out of it.
Yeah. So I think there's two angles to this. One is the productivity, creativity angle, and the other one's governance, right? And they're both very important. From a developer perspective, like, if you have one Postgres and one Databricks or Snowflake, and you just want to do that, cool, go for it, right? Now, if you have five Postgres, and as I said, Stripe and Databricks and Snowflake and some other thing and Marketo and Notion, like, do you really want to spend your time like building the connections to these, building the pipelines around these?
No pipelines, no pipelines.
Yeah, but you have to like, this is the point, right? Actually building it in an efficient,
Yeah,
scalable manner
yeah,
requires you to really sit there and think like,
yeah.
it's like data is always harder than it looks. Because what happens in the corner cases? How do you make sure that you have accurate data? How are you evaluating that data? Like, how are you making sure that you're not accessing, this is the governance piece now. On top of like building all these connectors, anytime you have to add a new connector, you have to build a new function at the very least, right? And then if you're training LLMs to do this stuff, you have to retrain them or you have to fine tune them. And by the way, they're always going to be behind because, again, training and fine tuning are, again, a form of like pipelining and ETL, right? So honestly, building these systems is very complex. And you can spend your creativity and complexity building the application layer, right? Delighting your users, building business value. You don't have to do the data retrieval piece, right? We can do it for you.
Consider this as infrastructure
Yes.
that you just use, right? So
And I-
so for you folks, right? So how long does it take to, if I tell you, hey, I have a new source, it's the new Stripe
Mhm.
or whatever, right? So, I mean, it doesn't exist yet. It's a new payment system that's gaining popularity. How long will it take you to build a connector?
It depends on how complex the system and the API is. For example, right? Like Salesforce is a very complex system, but it has a pretty defined API, right, that you can use. And there's some common data structures in it that you can use, right? So then it's like not that complicated. But any new system, it takes us between a few days and a week or so to build the
But
connector on
it's
average.
basically everything you do is above board and that you use some official API. You're not,
Correct.
right?
So let's talk, like there's two things I want to talk about actually. One is, which we were touching about in the previous question, the governance piece, right? So let's say you want to do all that work, but then, there is a whole thing around who is the right person to touch the right data, right? And how can you make sure that like, if you have data from different, like marketing as well as sales, as well as product, right? That there's no cross communication happening. You're not mixing the wrong data with the wrong, for the wrong people. And that kind of governance can sit with Snow Leopard, right? Because you can actually give us access to these 5 tables in this place and, only these certain things in this API. Like that kind of thing helps you with governance higher than within each source, right? Because each data source has its own IAM and governance pieces, but combining all of them and doing the combinatorics of it is pretty complicated. And so doing that in Snow Leopard makes it easier. That's the second reason for not building. But this whole thing around, I believe what we're building is part of the PaaS layer. If you think of cloud, right? Cloud as IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. And so you for AI too, I think of like, the IaaS layer, like Anyscale and things like that. And then there's PaaS, like I would consider Databricks and Snowflake and all these things as in sort of the upper layer of IaaS because it's really infrastructure, right? And then you need that middleware, that platform layer to help you aggregate or give you tooling around data, around compute, around all these things, right? LLM as a service, all that kind of stuff, so that you can build the AI application on top. Right? That's sort of the aim that we have here.
And by the way, it's also the other thing is the important thing that you're doing everything above board through some official API or the like is the following, right? So I mean, the source systems in many ways expect systems like Snow Leopard. Snow Leopard is like a user that's like trying to get information through an
Yes.
official API, right? So
Right.
so all these systems that you're actually hitting are architected is precisely so that you systems like you, which will end up serving these agentic applications, they expect these kinds of queries, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ben. And when I was talking about querying them natively, this is sort of what I meant, right? Like that you go through the front door, which means that it's very above board, but also like the most efficient, right? Like if I want to query Shopify data, like there's a whole API that they maintain, manage, make sure that they give the right data to in that, right? Again, the governance pieces, all that kind of stuff is all managed there for each data source. So native querying is not just about performance, it's actually about sort of correctness and accuracy as well, and governance as well, right? So yes, we are always on board, above board. And the real key value add is doing it at like on demand at query time, doing intelligent routing, which is hard to do, right? You could do this today by creating very complex decision trees or if-then loops, if you will, right? If you have this kind of question, go here. If you got like, right? But those are very deterministic. What Snow Leopard gives you is in a world of agents where there's a lot of non-determinism, there's a lot of different paths, there's a lot of ways in which the agent could behave. You can focus on the behavior part of building the agent, and we can give you the data the agent needs in order to make its decisions in real time.
So if I'm listening to this, I'm a developer and I know that for my agent, the two things I need are Stripe and Shopify. Thinking, well, maybe, maybe I'll just hit the API myself, right? But then I think the problem there is there's a lot of details that you
Yeah.
probably will. I mean, it's very hard. It's very easy to probably build a concept, a proof of concept, right? But then there's a lot of details, and then you end up also chasing a lot of these edge cases, and you find yourself boxed in because basically when you decide, hey, my agent would be interesting if I add a third thing,
Yes.
right? So in many ways, like you said, right? So if I just use Snow Leopard, then I can just kind of farm out this kind of,
That's right.
I hate to say it, boring problem.
No, you're right. Like
This
yeah.
kind of important but somewhat, non-essential, non-central problem to what I'm trying to do, which is to build this application, this agent, right? So and delight my users,
Yeah,
you know.
I would put it differently in that I think it's essential. It's essential work, so that's why people have to do it. But it's boring because you have to repeat the same task over and over again. Anytime there's a change in anything
Yeah.
to do with data, right? Schema changed, column changed, like you had to add a new data source. Forget new data source. You had to add a new table or a new set of APIs you need to hit for Shopify. All of that requires very detailed work because you don't want to miss corner cases because the place you want to delight your users is the agent or the app like the assistant, but you're spending all your time on scaffolding, which you're right, I am excited and the people in the systems world are excited by the boring because there is a bunch of complexity there that we like to tackle. And the reason for us to tackle that complexity, the way I think it's exciting to me is because then all the developers can build delight in the agents and the assistants and the sort of workflows that they're looking at on top of this.
So I'm not saying that these APIs change often, but they do change, right? So
And it's
Shopify
our job.
API, Stripe API change. So what's the plan to make sure that if I bet on Snow Leopard, one of my data sources makes some changes, how quickly can you guys
I mean, that's the whole point, right? That
Yeah.
we'll make the change, right?
Yeah.
And some changes can be automated, right? You just use a data catalog to reload a schema or something like that, or just, fetch the schema from the database itself. Others require like a little bit of rejigging, but it'll be our job to, if the API changes, for us to change. In fact, this is the other key thing here, right? It's not just about the data sources changing or the APIs changing. Let's say you're using functions and you're like, I'll just do it with the two functions. Functions are just like any other API. It's like saying, I'll just migrate from Postgres to MySQL. How hard could it be? It's just SQL. Anybody that's actually done it
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
will cringe right now. So
Yeah.
functions in Anthropic, in Snowflake, in Databricks, and in OpenAI are all different. So if you want to migrate, you just tell us and we'll flip. Like we have internal mechanisms for doing that. And you don't have to worry about it. Like you don't have to maintain that code in your application. To you, it's just an abstraction. If the developer is listening and they're familiar with sort of, everything is an abstraction, right? Like Snow Leopard becomes your data abstraction in a way, right? You don't have to worry about, oh, now I have to like re-implement this path because I changed a schema or I changed a function or I changed an LLM to get information.
So the early users of Snow Leopard, are you comfortable talking about some concrete users and use cases? You don't have to name companies or anything, but the actual app things
Yeah.
they're using it for and the systems they're hitting and so on.
Yeah, there's a couple that are like we're early, but the thing that I'm excited about is like the number of people who are in companies who are like excited about this, either because they were building it themselves and finding it hard, and then they're like, oh yeah, please take this away from me, or that they're just starting to realize that this is a problem, right? So we're working with a fintech company, like basically trying to create a SaaS application or SaaS platform for outsourcing companies financial stuff like accounts payable, accounts receivable, that kind of stuff. And internally they use AI systems and LLMs. And so we're going to help them build an internal BI tool, like an internal business analyst tool, so that anybody like the accountants or whoever can ask questions of all of the data that exists from all of the different places that like a company may have data from a bank, like from a payment system like Stripe, from the product like events metric, things like that, right? And all like Marketo, marketing stuff, all that stuff. And they may want to figure out, how many sales we had for this account in the last month, or how much whether somebody paid their subscription or not. Like those kinds of things are something that, today requires every question that needs to be answered requires a business analyst to spend a day or two to come up with the right query and then create a dashboard or something like that for it.
Is this an example where the systems you need to integrate to are pretty standard, or
Yes.
are they kind of specific to this company?
No, they're all standard. In fact, I think I can share this, but they have data in Stripe, in BigQuery, in I think Salesforce, in Notion, in Slack, right? So these are all very standard places to go get data from.
Which means for our listeners, those connectors exist in Snow Leopard.
Yeah, they will. And yes, and one of the ways in which which I'm building the company and the product, is by making sure that what we're building is actually valuable to somebody, right? So we're not here to build random ad hoc connectors, right? And by connector here, I don't just mean call an API, right? Connector means you understand the data source and have intelligence around the data. And so the reason to have design partners is so that we can make sure that we're building the right set of interfaces and the right set of connectors for the right type of data.
I imagine, one family of really pain in the ass connectors
Please tell me.
are the ones that have to do with ads, like Google Ads. Linked.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the interface for Google Ads is just insane. It's like one of these unexplainable things where 90% of the revenue of the company is from ads, but they don't seem to put their best engineers on this ad platform, on the interface at least.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just them, right? Salesforce is like that. A bunch of CRM systems are like that. Like they're just very complex systems and very modifiable, which means they're very hard to understand and very hard to connect during the ad hoc sense.
So have you come across someone who's requested a connector to one of these ad platforms?
Not yet, but
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to somebody who actually wants that data because, again, I want to build for value generation. And so if nobody cares, then I don't I don't care.
So besides the connectors that you mentioned in the context of this one company, what other connectors are you pretty confident now in terms of the ones that some others
And
are using?
so here's the thing. I'm confident in any SQL-based system. In fact, I think we can go up and running very quickly with any SQL-based system, right? Or SQL-like system even. For the API-based systems, I'm confident in the ones we've looked at, even if we haven't implemented it, because we know how to manage it, right? But I think any API system is so so different and so like a lot of them are very configurable, right? And so in that case, um, it's like a depends thing. But that's where we're growing, right? Like that's the part in which I want us to go. That's the sort of in terms of roadmap and things like that. I like we will want to build connectors to systems that people want. Like I'm absolutely not going to build random things, as I said, right? So anybody that has a connector or system that is different, because almost every company has something different. Like one thing will be different. And so we're very prepared to go build and look at those systems and connect to them.
So right now, it sounds like the companies you're working with are building internal kind of agents or internal tools, right? So they're not yet at the point where they're going to use something like Snow Leopard for an external facing chatbot. It's they're building tools for their internal analysts and internal workers.
I think we're starting there, but there's a clear understanding that, we will get to external looking facing things as well. And I think the main thing here is most companies are just at the early phase of,
Yeah, most generative AI applications are internal facing.
yeah, in fact, a lot of them are not even past POC. I spoke to somebody today and they were like, well, we have a RAG app, but whatever. It's not fun or great or accurate or whatever. So we haven't gone past POC, right? And so I think we're at the tip of this or at the beginning of this wave, this cycle. And what I'm confident about is because we're starting at this early stage, like we will grow as the market grows. And I feel very confident that we will be able to, hit the ground when we get to the meat of the bell curve, right? In a year or 2 years, something like that. Because frankly, nobody's even using agents right now. But the people who are building agents, like selling agents, those people are very excited about this kind of system, right? Because agents are just as good as the data that you connect to them. And so having something where they don't have to build the connections or rely on the company to build the connections so that they can sell the agent, like this seems very appealing to them.
Yeah, and Snow Leopard will make agents great again.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. I guess I have to agree. Yes. We are going to not just make agents great again. I think we'll just make agents great.
Um, so it seems like agents is to me agents is a very very good sweet spot for you because basically for agents to be interesting, it's really that live data, right?
Yes.
And then to me, the good news for you is that it seems like even though, as you said, we're very early in this agentic AI application world, I think it's pretty clear that it's going to happen. I mean, just
Yes.
the number of companies investing in it. I mean, big tech companies building agent type capabilities. It's going to happen, right?
What
And
I think
so
is, sorry, go ahead.
it becomes clear then that if agents are going to happen, the only way agents become interesting really at some level, unless, like I said, if the agent's job is to look at the past, okay,
Mhm.
maybe I don't need Snow Leopard. But I think a huge proportion of agents, in order for them to be really helpful, will have to look at what's happening now.
Yes, I also want to add to that, Ben, that it's not just about like the live data or the freshest data, but the right data. So if you need to look at historical data and you need to go to a warehouse or lake house or whatever, like again, we can go there. I think the interesting thing about agents is fetching data from multiple
Hmm.
sources,
Hmm.
right? And fetching from the right sources at the time of query, right? So you really want to do aggregation of data from multiple sources, but in the agent layer or in the data intelligence for the agent layer. That's what we can do, right? That's what our aim is to do. Like it's not just about fetching, but if you want to fetch data, like, you know, what's the most popular sweater color and did I order it in my last order comes from Postgres and, Databricks or Snowflake. And we
And
can
then
fetch those and give it.
you can imagine. So if people think of you as like some sort of middleware where you
Mm-hmm.
grab the data, they
Mm-hmm.
can actually even use you in conjunction with RAG, right?
That's exactly right. That's a great way of thinking about it. RAG just becomes a complement, right? If I just need to go fetch from a vector store, I can do that too, right? It's so you can have your whole RAG pipeline and you can have Snow Leopard, or you can
Well,
just
Snow Leopard is not a pipeline.
no, you can have your RAG pipeline.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
never.
yeah,
Like, but
yeah,
we can connect to your vector store too, right? So
yeah.
it becomes like a great way to complement what you've built for your unstructured stuff with your structured operational API stuff, which like our aim is to be that intelligence layer for data so that people can build, today it's assistants, maybe tomorrow it's agents, who knows what it's going to be in like 5 years time, maybe some more interesting stuff. And frankly, I am confident that all that stuff needs data. And like I am in the business of making sure that all those applications, all those fun things that haven't been invented yet using AI can just get the right data at the right time.
Yeah, because you don't know. In the future, we might have operational data that's not structured. Could
That's
be
right.
images, could be audio, right?
I mean, embedded systems and IoT, sometimes like they today even generate a bunch of video images, right? Like so like it's a question of whatever data there is, like we should be able to fetch it at the right time.
So what's on the next 6 to 12 month roadmap?
Um, Building more connections to more data sources on like based on customer demand, right? And actually doing cross data source joins. And then we're going to build sort of management and governance through that we can do remotely through cloud. But the one thing I forgot to mention is that we like I don't like data movement, right? Like I think enterprises are loath to send their data somewhere else, right? And so Snow Leopard from inception is about can we be in your VPC, right? It's based on an on-prem sort of VPC style thing where the aim is to manage it remotely, but the data and the data stuff around it all sit in your domain, in your trust domain.
What about, so do you have any plans in the future to have some sort of open source or open component?
Yes, very much so. I think at this point, um, I'm trying to figure out what's the most valuable thing to make open source, right? Because again, I am very much a product and user person. I want to see what is actually helpful. My guess, if you ask me today, would be that the connectors would be open source, right? Um, but our aim is to make stuff open source so that more and more people can take advantage of whatever that we build. And then our value add, on top of it is where Snow Leopard will provide other proprietary information and data.
So today's December 5th. If a listener or a viewer goes to snowleopard.ai, what should they expect?
We are sort of not in stealth, semi-stealth, right? And so you should be able to see my talk. You should be able to see this conversation. Hopefully, will go up there so that people get a better sense. I think we're early enough that people don't understand this no pipeline and no ETL world. And so I think the first thing is to just understand the problem that we're trying to solve and the solution as we see it. So we'll have slides up there too, and I'll have a 60-second overview of what we're doing. But I think what I'd really love is for people to just ping me, like sign up for Snow Leopard, right? Or ping me if you're curious about this, like Deepti@snowleopard.ai. But you know, I'm very interested in talking to people who have this problem, who are curious, like live data curious, as I say. Like, please just ping me. I'd love to have a chat and see what your thoughts are, and we can even show you a demo.
And how does someone uh, become one of the early users?
You ping me, and then I'll
Okay.
talk to you about what you're doing.
And so right now you have the bandwidth to take on more
Yes.
users. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a few folks that we're working with already, and then there is bandwidth for more, just because I want to diversify the types of workloads that we're supporting today.
And with that, thank you, Deepti.
Thank you, Ben.